All right, folks, I want to welcome our guest to the show. It is Eric Palacios from the Hairy Man Road YouTube channel. Welcome back to the show, man.
Hey, Brian, I appreciate you having me. It's good to be here.
I have been looking forward to this conversation. I have to be honest, probably more than most I have these days because of all the craziness that's going on in the Bigfoot world. If you're anywhere near Bigfoot, unless you're living with your head under a rock or stuck in the sand, you know that there's some big controversy brewing around the Patterson Gimlin film. We're going to get into that tonight because you're the only person I know personally who's actually seen this documentary, Capturing Bigfoot, that we're going to talk about a little bit later. But for those that might have missed your first appearance on the show, they may not know who you are, what you're doing in the Bigfoot world. Let's start there. Let's give everybody a little bit of a base for you. Who is Eric? What got you interested in this subject? And what's been going on in the Bigfoot world for you over the last couple of years?
I'm from North Austin, Texas, born and raised, been here pretty much my entire life. As far as the Bigfoot subject goes, the town I grew up in, Round Rock, Texas, there was always this legend of the Hairy Man Road where I adopted that name from. And it's a legend that goes back all the way to the 1800s of settlers traveling through the area, and they were allegedly chased out by a wild hairy man. And we heard this story growing up as kids, but I didn't really put much stock into it until I got older and I started hearing other stories, and I even had an experience myself. And so that kind of laid the groundwork for me to produce my own documentary. And it was called The Beast of Brushy Creek. And that was about 2 years in the making, where I just dove in headfirst into the local lore and into the people, what people were saying in the area. And I was actually able to find the real reason that road was called Hairy Man Road from my research. And that was, I found a book from the local postmaster who worked in the area. And he basically tells the story in his memoir about a group of kids in 1966, believe it or not, were hanging out in this area known as Hairy Man Road. It wasn't Hairy Man Road at the time. Group of them hanging out. One of these kids gets stranded, and then the next day he shows up to school saying he got chased out of the area by a wild hairy man. And ever since then, it was like going around school, caught fire. Shortly after that, the road was officially named Hairy Man Road. And ever since then, I mean, there's been a long standing of people having sightings, weird encounters, all types of, if you want to say, quote unquote, paranormal stuff happening out there. So I did a lot of research, and that's where my documentary ended up coming out. And I also did a follow-up, mainly more focused on the Hairy Man Road itself. It was a legend of Hairy Man Road. And after I finished doing the documentaries and stuff, I wanted to branch out and use my background. I have a background in journalism. So I heard a lot of stories people grow up with, the lore of Bigfoot. And I want to know if there was anything more that people hadn't discovered or weren't talking about. So I used my background. I started doing Freedom of Information Act requests, FOIA requests. And in that pursuit, I actually got some really incredible stuff. I've got 911 phone calls of people calling sheriff's offices saying, hey, I got Bigfoot on my game camera. I've even got photographs of what people are claiming to be Bigfoot. Recently, I actually got the entire information, the cryptid database of the Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries, and it has every cryptid piece of information they have in there. And there's a couple of that are really interesting. One of the ones that stood out to me was that this Louisiana officer was polling all his rangers or whatever, saying, hey, I need to know if you guys have seen any cryptids, anything weird. He says Bigfoot, Chupacabra. I think he even says the Rougarou in there because it's Louisiana. And a lot of them, I think the majority just said, haven't seen anything. And I have the email chain there. I haven't seen anything, nothing. And then two guys have two separate encounters with people that called them personally saying, hey, I have stuff going on my property. Another guy said, hey, I got this thing crossing the road. I witnessed this thing crossing the road or whatever. And these are stories that you're not going to see on a forum or a Facebook group, anything like that. These are from law enforcement that they were never expecting this stuff to come out. So they're speaking freely. And it's interesting when you see that. And most recently, I did the same thing for the Arizona Game and Fish. And I have every piece of cryptid information they've ever produced. There's a really interesting encounter where a couple encounter something with glowing red eyes. They call the police. And at the end of the call, the dispatcher says it must be Bigfoot. Like, whether or not he's serious, it's interesting. But they were hysterical, apparently. And I'm trying to get that phone call. Unfortunately, I'm learning as we go along that a lot of these agencies, law enforcement agencies, they only hold the phone calls for, they have different standards, but a lot of them is just 60 days to 90 days. And then they just completely delete it, which is, it's sad because you think about all the opportunities that have been missed, but a lot of times there is radio transmissions typed up or whatever. Same thing with the calls. You actually get the transcripts. So little by little, I'm working to patch together this chain of law enforcement Bigfoot evidence, if you will.
Absolutely love it, man. Very few people dive into the FOIA request because you can certainly testify to it's not an easy process for most people to figure out. It's a lot of hoops to jump through. A lot of cases, it's very expensive.
Yeah.
These jurisdictions, I know you've run into that. I think we talked about that the first time you were on the show. They're charging, in some cases, tens of thousands of dollars to get this information. And it's a huge roadblock for a lot of people that are trying to get that. So I am so glad that you're out there fighting the good fight and doing that. But that's not what we're here for, folks. We are here to talk about the Sacred Cow, the Patterson Gimlin film, this new documentary, Capturing Bigfoot, that has literally captured everybody in the Bigfoot community's attention over these last couple of weeks. It started swirling around the drain for me probably 2.5 weeks or so. I started seeing some rumblings online. Let me ask you this, Eric. When did it first become something that was on your radar? How did you find out about the documentary? And how did you ultimately end up at this screening that you went to in Austin to see this film?
Yeah, it was a spur of the moment type of thing. I'm a Bigfoot researcher, investigator, if you will. It popped up on my radar. I'd seen an article basically saying that this new documentary was premiering at South by Southwest. It supposedly has this new footage. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. And didn't get a lot of buzz. I think there was only one article I could find about that. So I'd actually heard about that maybe 5 or 6 days before the actual screening was to take place. And I was like, man, I got to be there. I got to be there. Unfortunately, South by Southwest it's crazy expensive. You're talking about platinum badges going for $3,000, film and TV badges going for $1,500. And so I wasn't about to pay that much, but luckily I've worked in public broadcasting for 10 plus years. And we've got a little group within our own collective that we're able to message each other and stuff like that. And luckily I was able to find someone that wasn't going to be able to use their badge. So offered him some money for it, got the badge, and I was ready. I was set. But just getting the badge, that doesn't mean you're going to get into the screening because it's a limited screening, especially where they had the screening at. It was the Alamo Draft House in Austin, South Lamar. It's a really tiny venue. You're talking about 30 seats in there. It's a really small venue. So I got the platinum badge and I was like, hey, I got to get there early. I waited in line for 6.5 hours to make sure I got a seat there. And people are passing me by. Hey, what are you here to see? Oh, Capturing Bigfoot. What are you here to see? They named the movie. A lot of people, even at South by, didn't even realize that this was a thing. The Bigfoot movie was a thing. But I think once the screening time started rolling around 9:15 or whatever, people started showing up. And then there was even like a Bigfoot guy in a costume walking around. So people were like, what's up with the Bigfoot stuff? A lot of people coming up to me and asking me what's going on. And I actually did a live stream with Sasquatch Secrets on Nikki's channel, which is pretty cool. I was waiting in line while that whole thing's going on just to prove I was there, guys. I was there. I had the ticket and everything. But that was really cool. And sure enough, I see Clint Patterson walking up. I recognized him right away, cowboy hat, suit. And I walked right up to him and started asking him questions and stuff like that. He was really nice and polite. Shortly after that, the director, Mark Evans, was there with his producer. They saw what I was doing. They were interested and came up to talk to me a little bit. We had a little conversation, and then it was getting ready to head into the theater. They wanted to make sure I had a seat because they know I had been there for 6 hours. And a lot of times with South by Southwest, you'll get some of these, I guess, celebrities. Like everybody was saying John Stamos was there. I didn't see him, but everybody's, oh, John Stamos is there. So it could have filled up. And he actually came and pulled me into the theater. They had 2 screens that were showing the film on. The first theater had filled up. So I was like, oh, crap, that's not good. And so luckily there were like 4 seats left in the other theater. So he made sure I got a seat. He says, okay, cool. He says, you want to attend the Q&A? I was like, hell yeah, I want to attend the Q&A. He's like, okay, cool. I'll come back and get you. Watched the film. It was incredible. And they came back and brought me for the Q&A. But that's basically the story of how I got there. It was really lucky. It was just a matter of chance, but I tried it. I had to be there. If it was happening in my hometown, I wasn't going to let it slide. So that's made it happen, luckily. Yeah.
I am so glad you did, because when this started, I was getting voicemails, I was getting text messages, emails. what do you think about this? What do you think about that? There's supposed to be this new clip in this film that may or may not prove that the Patterson Gimlin film is a hoax. And I'm like, guys, I have zero information here. I'm just finding this stuff out in real time. I don't know anybody who's seen it. I've certainly not seen the documentary itself. So I waited. I sat back and I just watched what was unfolding. And I was watching people, frankly, make a fool of themselves. I'm not going to really call anybody out here, but there's plenty of Bigfooters that are very well known that are out there painting themselves into a corner, in my opinion. And there may be some steaming hot crow or even some cold crow that's got to be eaten at some point in time on both sides of the aisle here. But I was just going to stay quiet because I had nothing to say. And who wants my opinion anyway? I sat back and waited, and I was so glad to see that you took the time to do a reaction video. And as soon as that popped up on my YouTube feed, I was like, I've got to watch what Eric's got to say because he was there. Yeah. It's about 33 minutes or so, and I was blown away. First and foremost, I have to say, just the emotion that I felt from you, because you're clearly someone who has a vested interest in some ways in this subject. You are an investigator. You are a researcher who cares about the subject, just like the rest of us who I think are in this for the right reasons. So the Patterson Gimlin film is a touchy subject for a lot of people. I think it has become over the years the sacred cow, if you will, in the church of Bigfoot. There are people that they defend it wholeheartedly. And that's what's happening right now. And it's one of those things, oh, I always knew it was a hoax. This just proves it. And then on the other side of the aisle, you have these people screaming that I stand with Bob, Patty's real, the whole 9 yards. And frankly, nobody who's talking about it, other than you that I know, has actually seen the documentary. I was so glad to see that you did that video because it gave me something to go on, because we're not best friends. We don't hang out, but I know you. You've been on the show. I've followed what you do, and I respect what you do in this community. So when someone that I see as an honest person who doesn't have a dog in this proverbial fight, who's just simply reacting to what they saw, evidence that has been presented to them, that was very powerful for me to go on and do a live on my social media and talk a little bit about, hey, this is what's going on. This is what Eric has said he saw, and this is somebody that I trust. I trust your opinion in the community enough to say, if Eric is saying that he saw this. So of course, when I did that, it was not 10 minutes later, my phone was ringing and it was Doug Hycheck. Doug Hycheck called me and he said, hey, I saw your live. Let me give you some information about what I know. So Doug and I had about a 30-minute conversation, and then the phone rang and it was somebody else. It was Steve Coles. It was this person. It was that person. I've told everybody the same thing ever since I watched your reaction video. If what you've described, and we're certainly going to get into that in a moment, if what you've described seeing in this documentary is accurate, it is very troublesome, at the very least, for the authenticity of the Patterson Gimlin film. Because this film has stood like 57 years in, and it's been studied, it's been torn apart, it's been put back together. And so many people have come down on so many sides, but by and large, I think the majority of the Bigfoot community, and I'm using my proverbial air quotes here, believe that it's real. I've always had a problem with the authenticity of the film. I've been on the record about that for years, just until the last year and a half, 2 years. I actually did a show where I compared some earlier interviews with Bob, and by earlier, an interview with he and Roger 6 days after they allegedly filmed Patty, over on the Sasquatch archives with Todd Prescott. I reached out to Todd. He allowed me to use that for the show. And then I think that last interview with Bob was about 2019-ish. And I put my cop brain on. Look, I can't tell you, I'm not a film expert. I can't break down Patty's walk. I can't talk about what's in the film. But what I can talk about is what Bob has said for the last 5+ decades. And I can look at that and how that's changed, or if it's changed over the years. And there were certainly some inconsistencies there that most people, including myself, ultimately chalked up to, hey, this guy's in his late 80s. He's now in his early 90s. Do I remember what I had for breakfast this morning? I don't. So is it possible that he gets some things wrong over the course of 50+ years? I gave the man some grace. And I finally, just about a year and a half ago, said, you know what? I have to say, having looked at the totality of the circumstances, I feel like Bob's probably telling the truth. So there you go. End of story. Until something else comes along that may prove otherwise. And I think that's part of the issue that we're having in this Bigfoot community, just frankly at large, but specific to the Bigfoot community, is people seem to get into these groups, these camps, and nothing can sway them. If they've made up their mind, they don't want any more evidence. And that's one of the sad things that I've seen. People that I've talked to and become friends with in the Bigfoot community that are out there screaming to the rafters, they're attacking you. They're attacking Mark Evans. They're attacking anybody who's even remotely in the orbit of this film just because it's challenging what they've convinced themselves to be real without looking at the evidence. And that is a problem for me. That's a huge red flag. There's people out there calling for boycotts of the documentary. It's a hoax. They've made this up. Clint Patterson's just looking for a payday. And that is really sad to me because it just says to me that you're not really seeking the truth. You're only seeking confirmation of what you already believe. And to me, that's problematic because I don't care if Patty's real or not. I know the experiences I've had. I know the experiences thousands of people now at this point that I've interviewed have shared with me. I know those to be true. I've stood 10 feet away from one of these creatures. I know they're real. And I've said that since day one. Patty can be fake and Bigfoot can still be real. Those two things can exist at the same time. They can be mutually exclusive. I said all that to say, let's get into, you get into the documentary, you're watching it. Obviously, you can see the players. You can pull it up on IMDb right now. You can see the names that are in this documentary. You've got the late Dr. Jeff Meldrum, Bob Hieronymus, Lunge. You've got Greg Long, Patricia Patterson, Clint Patterson. You've got all the players in this story. So to me, it's about the totality of the circumstances. I guess a good place to start would be, let's talk about the role that Clint Patterson and Patricia Patterson play in this documentary, because I think that's very powerful. To me, when you have someone that close to someone who then comes out and says, hey, that's not entirely accurate, or that's not true, or this is a hoax, I think you should perk up and listen. So can you walk us through what you see their role in the documentary? And then certainly we'll get into, obviously, the 40-second clip that comes a little bit later.
Yeah, the documentary, first of all, is just super emotionally charged. You're hearing stories about Clint, him and his siblings being brought out to the living room and his grandmother pretty much breaking the news, hey, your father died last night. And that was just a gut punch to him. The love and admiration he had for his dad was just second to none. And he talks about it in the documentary. I could care less about Bigfoot. I just wanted to be out there with my dad. He goes, and if he's Bigfoot hunting, then we're Bigfoot hunting. And that was really, interesting and hard to see the way he was getting choked up every time he talked about his dad. You could tell he really loved his dad. Shortly after this, his father had passed away. He talks about going into the living room one day and his mother is there smoking cigarettes. They're talking and she basically confesses that Bob Hieronymus was in the Bigfoot suit to him when he was a younger child. He said that always stuck with him, and he wanted to relay that to everybody years after the footage made its rounds and it became viral and how big it was. But his mother was honestly making so much money from the Patterson film, she couldn't let that go. And they talk about that was her nest egg in the documentaries. That's what they refer to it as. And that caused a very huge rift between Clint and his mother. It was really bad. She was sending him letters basically saying, I disown you. I wish you were never born. And those letters are shown in the documentary. So much hard evidence is shown in the documentary. It's really incredible. There is a scene where he's trying to reconcile with his mother, and I believe it's Roger Patterson's sister actually acts as the go-between, trying to get them to speak again. And there's a scene, I believe he's in like a van and he gets a phone call, and it's his aunt, Roger Patterson's sister, and she's saying, hey, your mom wants to see you. And he's, are you kidding me? Oh, great, let's do it. And then she basically says, don't even call, just drive right over. She wants to see you right now. And he's like, yeah, let's do it. And so they drive right over. They see each other through the screen door. They open it and they just embrace, and it's just waterfalls. It's actually a really beautiful moment. They talk about the past and hash everything out. And she's basically saying, I want to come clean. I have a couple of good years left. People need to know about this. It's pretty wild. They show her the new footage and it's pretty spectacular. But Clint, I think he really wanted to do the right thing. And at first, there's this weird part of the documentary where he's sad about talking about his dad and everything, but it gets to like towards the end, the middle of the documentary, and he's basically saying, my dad fooled him, just a regular cowboy. He fooled him. And he's saying he went viral before viral was a thing, and he pulled off the greatest hoax, and he's just a small old cowboy. And so he was actually really proud of his dad for being able to pull off this hoax for so long. And he was mentioning like it fooled scientists, it fooled FX people, and basically all this stuff. And he was right about that. He's absolutely right about that. And you might hate the guy, but it's pretty impressive what these guys were able to do. Just a couple of cowboys out there. Yeah.
That has been the narrative since this film was filmed, is at least on the side of its authenticity, as people would say, these were just two cowboys. There's no way they could have pulled off the hoax of the century. They couldn't have made a suit like this. They couldn't have done this, that, or the other. So it's interesting that was, it seems like somewhat of a focal point of the documentary to say, yeah, actually, they did pull it off. Just two cowboys out there in the woods pulled off, in my opinion, if this is what it turns out to be, the hoax of the century. I was racking my brain after this all came out, and I was thinking to myself, what hoax can we point to? I'm sure there's another one out there that's similar in certain ways, but what else can you point to in the last 50 plus years that someone has been able to hoax and get away with for this long? Nothing really comes to mind outside of potentially now the Patterson Gimlin film. So let's get to the meat and potatoes, because that was one part of the story. Obviously, if you have potentially some sort of a rift in the family and you have the quote unquote black sheep on the outside saying, yeah, this is fake, it's always been fake, that kind of thing, that's one thing. You say, yeah, okay, maybe not. But then you got Patricia on board as well. So now you've got the two closest people, in theory, to Roger Patterson and this film saying, yes, it's a hoax. That really makes my ears stand up and I really pay attention. But then ultimately, you have this other film that you talked about, this clip, this 40 some odd second clip. I've talked about this on other shows. I've shared it on my show, but I want, for the audience listening now, can you talk a little bit about how they talk about the provenance of this in the documentary, how Mark Evans eventually got this? Can you talk a little bit about how this was discovered and how the filmmakers ultimately got that?
Yeah, so it was basically a daughter of, I guess, an engineer or film developer that worked for Boeing. And I believe the man passed away in the 2020s, maybe 2024. I'm not exactly sure. He had passed away, and she knew about this film that had been stored away in this safe. And she basically says in the documentary that there was so much kind of turmoil going on around Bigfoot at that time that the wife of the person that I mentioned, she basically says, I don't want anything to do with it. Bigfoot is not allowed to be talked about in this house. And the dad ends up locking it in a safe. And years later, the daughter is saying how she's scared to walk to school or whatever, walking home because Bigfoot might come out and grab her. And the dad jokingly says, oh, you don't have to worry about that. It's this and that. It's not real. And I got something or whatever. So she had always known about this through a family legend or whatever. So he ends up passing away. They find the footage. They don't know what's on it. So that's where she goes to the university where Mark actually teaches a documentary course there, I guess, to have it digitized. And so they take it and they realize what's on the film. And they're like, wow, this is pretty amazing. And they basically build the documentary around this piece of footage. I know Clint had been wanting to come public even before that footage was out. He wanted to make statements and stuff like that. That's really where the rift with him and his mom started. But it's 100% confirmed. There's a guy with a loop doing a film analysis in the documentary. I know there's a lot of people saying it's like AI and stuff like that. It's absolutely not AI. They have it, and he's looking through the loop, and he's basically saying, yep, everything looks good. It's got the markings on there. People have been arguing in all over these forums and stuff about these markings, and I've heard all types of crazy stuff, but they absolutely 100% say this film is from 1966 without a doubt. The creation of the documentary basically begins with the daughter of this Boeing engineer coming to Mark Evans asking for help to digitize this, and they see it and they're pretty much shocked. Mark is actually from that area of the Pacific Northwest, so he's a not maybe not as deep as we are into the subject, but he's definitely a fan and he's known about the Patterson stuff for a long time. I think he might have had some connection with Al Diatley, or his family did at one point. So it's all really interesting, and it's cool because it's not some outsider. It's a guy who was around there, knows all the stuff, and it's cool that he was actually lucky enough to get this. And it's pretty amazing what's on the footage. I'll just say that for sure.
I definitely want to get into that because when I saw your reaction video, I started reaching out to people, calling people. The first person I reached out to get on the show to talk about it was Bill Munns, because Bill has done the most work that I'm aware of on the Patterson Gimlin film, maybe outside of MK Davis. He's very familiar with this. He knows it inside and out. He's considered an expert on the Patterson Gimlin film. So I reached out to Bill, and Bill is actually in the documentary. So I got him on the show, and I thought it was a great conversation. I asked some pretty hard questions, I think, some pretty tough questions, because let's be honest, Bill does have a dog in this proverbial fight. He's written a book already about the Patterson Gimlin film. He's clearly on record 100% that it's real. He's actually in the process of writing a second book on the Patterson Gimlin film that will now, I'm sure, have a few chapters included about this capturing Bigfoot and this footage and the whole 9 yards. But during that conversation with Bill, he saw the 40-second or so clip. He said they brought him in and interviewed him for a little over 4 hours for this doc. Basically get him on record, let him say all the things he wants to say about the Patterson film, and then they're like, oh, wait, there's more. Now we want to show you this clip. Classic television. It's the way to get the reaction. It's the money shot, right? You withhold the information, you know you're going to spring on people at the last minute. So Bill was a little taken aback when they said that they had this film that nobody had ever seen before. He already had some things in his mind. He told me a couple of things he thought it could be, because he knows there's other film that used to exist. I don't know if it's still out there now. He seems to think that it's out there somewhere, that Roger and Bob, and even Bob Hieronymus, was involved in filming at one point in time or another when they were doing this docudrama that they were filming when they actually allegedly filmed Patty. So Bill actually he was naming some things off. He said, oh, is it this? Or, oh, is it this? Or is it this piece of footage? Or is it this footage? And they were like, no, I don't think you've seen this before. And they show it to him. And the first thing that he says to me is, when they started the clip, it opens up with someone pretending to be Bob Gimlin. I just left it at that. And then he says, it looks like someone in a suit. I think he described it as a medium grade suit. He said it looked like it was created specifically for this filming. He even went so far as to say it wasn't some off the rack gorilla suit like Philip Morris. He took a little backhanded swat at Philip Morris would make for something like this. So he did say that although he wasn't impressed with this particular suit, it wasn't just some off the rack thing. It looked like it had been made for this particular purpose. And I asked him specifically, number one, what drew him to believe Patty was real in the first place and not a suit? And he said it was the head. He focused in on the head and the shoulders because his background is special effects. He has made similar costumes for movie projects and television projects in the past. And he said that is the toughest thing, or at least was the toughest thing back then, to get that, because you didn't have the correct materials for all that to lay flat with a person, a man or a woman in a suit. So he focused in on that, and he didn't see any of the telltale signs or issues, as you would say, with Patty. And that really made him want to hone in and dive deeper into it. And the deeper he got, he believes that it's a real film. So I said, what about what you saw in this 40-second clip? And he said, the head wasn't right for me. The body wasn't right for me. It wasn't particularly Patty. He did go on to say that he was very impressed by the walk. It was almost identical. I'm clearly paraphrasing here, so it's not a direct quote, but he said something along the lines of he was very impressed with the walk, the gait in the film. It was very much like what we see in the Patterson Gimlin film. So he was impressed with that. But overall, he didn't think it was Patty or the suit that would have been Patty. Let's talk about what you saw.
Yeah.
You talked about it in your reaction video that you posted over on Harryman Road YouTube channel, and I'll certainly link to that in the show notes so you guys can go over and watch that and show Eric some love on YouTube. But let's talk specifically about what you saw. Let's focus in on that 40+ second film clip that you saw and be as detailed as you can. What did you see and what did you walk away feeling after you watched that part of the doc?
Yeah. So I was laser focused because I knew that part was coming up. And so I literally stood up in my chair and I'm looking at it, just making sure I was going to remember everything that I saw. And I did see your podcast with Bill Munns, and I don't want to take anything away from Bill. He is an expert in the VFX and he's got a long history of that. And that's more props to him for that. But he saw the footage several months ago. I saw it about 11 days ago. So his memory might not be as clear as his mind seeing it so recently. But yeah, it starts off with a familiar face. Basically, you see a man on a pony, and I don't know how you pretend to be somebody, but it's clearly, to me, it looks like it's Bob Gimlin. It's absolutely Bob Gimlin. He's looking right at the camera. And I think Bill might be misremembering saying that he's holding a shotgun or a rifle, because when I look at it, he's holding a pistol. It's like a 6-shooter pistol. He's in a rain slicker. It looks like it might be drizzling, and he's looking dead straight at the camera, and it's Bob Gimlin. And Patricia Patterson even says that's Bob Gimlin. It cuts to or moves over to Patty, and it's the same suit. It's 100% the same suit without a doubt. It doesn't take a visual effects expert to see that that's the same suit, unfortunately. Patty's kind of obscured by the trees and everything like that. What I remember is how vivid it looked, really clean, looked really crisp. There's actually a lot of green foliage, so maybe it's shot in the spring, maybe April or something like that, but it definitely looks like a lot of green around, not autumn or fall when there's supposedly the 67 footage took place, a lot more green. So we see Patty walking behind these trees that are pretty full trees. I'm thinking when I see that, oh God, we're only going to see her behind trees. It's going to suck. We're not going to get a clear shot. But no, boom, it cuts to a shot of Patty right there, front and center, and you can see everything. And it's way closer than the 67 footage. You get a really good shot. There is some movement. The walk, I don't think it walks as much as Bill mentioned, but it does do a walk. And then it looks back at the camera and it's almost looking like it's waiting for instructions on what to do. And you can see it. It's clearly the same suit. It has breasts. The head looks the same. It's the same conical style. The color is spot on. To me, it looks exactly like almost a charcoal black color. And it's Patty in all her glory. And one thing that I haven't said is that behind Patty, this is the first time I've said this, there's like a dirt mound. You can see like this dirt mound that might have given away, or maybe people will be able to analyze the size once the footage comes out. You might be able to analyze the size of that because there's like a big dirt mound or some type of dirt structure that's behind Patty. You can see it. They do raise the foot like the 67 footage. And when I see the foot, it's the exact same foot we're seeing in the original Patterson footage. It's just a dead giveaway. As soon as I saw it, maybe a second into seeing it, I was like, wow, that's Patty. And it's shocking because after seeing the video so many times, you're seeing the same subject, but in a different video in a different location. And so your brain just, I don't know, it teases itself a little bit. It felt really weird. Like the whole time I'm watching with my mouth open, I'm just studying this thing. I mean, it's 100% Patty. It's clear, it's evident that it's Patty. I've heard some people online say it's like skinnier. It's not as bulky. It looks exactly the same to me. And the rumor is that it's Al Diatley in the suit. This time it's not Bob Hieronymus. They actually show Bob Hieronymus the footage and he's, yep, that's the same suit, but that's not me in the suit that time. So I thought that was interesting too. But the footage is really crisp and clear. There's less shaking. There's actually really a lot less shaking. So you get a good view of Patty. Like I said, it's a lot closer. You're able to see the face a lot better than the 67 footage. I mean, it's 100% Patty. And I think, is it Lund? Lund was actually watching the documentary and they do a side-by-side layout, like the backs, both of them. And you can actually see the lines and the dimples on both suits. They show the foot up in the air and it's the same identical foot. It's unfortunate that Bill hasn't seen the documentary because he didn't get to see the comparison of both. And I know he said he wanted to see like clips or he wanted to be able to use some of the stuff in this new 40-second clip, but unfortunately that didn't happen. And to me, that was just a dead giveaway. When they're showing them side by side, you're just like, wow, that's the same suit. And I haven't talked to too many people who have seen the footage, but the people I have talked to that have seen the footage are not Bigfoot people at all. And they're basically like, yeah, of course it's the same suit. Like you can tell right away, like it's obvious. I know there's a lot of speculation about the way they walk and the muscles popping out of the suit and stuff like that. But to me, all that stuff is null and void when you see the actual suit. You can argue about when this was shot, recreation or whatever, but it's the same suit. Unless Roger Patterson asked a real Bigfoot for a second take, it's the same suit. I'm sorry. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it is what it is. And I think a lot of people are going to be shocked when they see it. I was just in shock. And Ryan, I hope you film your reaction when you see this. I want to see your reaction and see what you think.
I definitely can't wait to see it myself. I guess the thing for me is I'm glad you broke that down because I got the feeling that Bill, and he was very honest. He said he saw this back in 2024 when they were filming. So it's been a while since he's seen this footage. And that was a very good point that you made. But he immediately went to, there's one of two things happening here. Either what we're watching, this 40-second clip, is a dry run dress rehearsal for the PG film, or it is a replica where they're trying to replicate what was filmed in 1967 and what we know as the Patterson Gimlin film. And I didn't really press him on it. I didn't push him on it, maybe as much as I should have in the interview. But after the interview, and I've had time to let that settle, and I've been a guest on a couple of podcasts talking about this, it makes no sense to me. And let me ask you, you're a documentary filmmaker. You've produced your own documentary. As a layman who doesn't have a dog in any fight when it comes to anything film related, it does not make sense to me that you go out and film the real thing. Why would you go back a year, 2 years, a month, a week, 10 years later and try to replicate it?
Yeah.
It makes no sense to me. And Bill's thing was, I think Al Diatley, they're going on the road with this. They're charging people money to see this film. He wanted to make sure that he wasn't having his leg pulled, that Roger and Bob were pulling a fast one on him, and they had basically hoaxed this whole thing. It makes no sense. Al Diatley, from what I've even heard you say, and I've heard other people say, he was a shrewd businessman, not a very nice person, I don't think. I don't like to talk ill of the dead, but he doesn't appear to be a very nice person. And he doesn't strike me as the type that would just go out and waste time, energy, effort, and money to replicate something that everybody's already accepted as real. I think I compared it on the show earlier when I was talking about this. I've written 5 books. I like the books. People think they're great. I don't rewrite the books to see if I can do it better.
Yeah.
You just do it, and it is what it is. So I'll stop talking and ask you a question. As a filmmaker who produced your own documentary, does it make sense to you that you got it right the first time and then you go back and try to replicate it afterwards? Or does it make sense that you want to get it right the first time, so you practice until you get it that way and you get the money shot the first time around?
Yeah, that's what I think. And you got to remember, back in the day, they didn't have viewfinders. They weren't able to rewind the tape and play it right away. They would have had to have some type of dry run rehearsals to get it right, because you're not on, what is it, Adobe editing stuff. You can't just go back and look at it. You have to have that developed. You got to go back, and it's a painstaking thing to do. So I think they needed to try it a couple of times before they actually figured out the formula they wanted to use. And I did hear Bill basically say that you can't use the new footage to prove the 67 footage is a hoax, because no one has proved the 67 footage is a hoax before. So I really couldn't understand the logic there. I don't know, there was rules to debunking the Bigfoot stuff or whatever, but yeah, to me, it just makes no sense. And if they did it afterwards, I imagine they were busy with their traveling, making money. So why would you stop all that to go back and film something else? To me, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And I really can't understand that. And even some people were saying this was like part of the documentary or the film that Roger was making. And people have said that Bob Gimlin is dressed up in Native American gear and this new stuff. And that's not the case at all. This is absolutely new footage, and it's a dry run. It's a rehearsal. And Jeff Meldrum basically said the same thing. And I'm glad someone with sense, someone who is in the community at the time, had the gumption to say, yeah, this is a dry run. It looks like a dry run. What else would it be? I just can't imagine them trying to recreate something after it, to me, it doesn't hold water. I can't find any logic in that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm the same way. It just doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. You and I talked a little bit about this before we hit the record button, but I've put this out there as much as I can online, on the show. I did an entire newsletter about it. I've narrated the newsletter and put it out there because I want people to have as much information as I have, which is not a ton. But here's the thing that I think is the huge red herring that's been thrown out there since this has come out. You basically broke the story in the Bigfoot community about what you saw, is that it all comes down to, I watched a video today of the Cabin in the Woods channel on YouTube.
Yeah.
He's arguing that nothing really matters because the people who produce this film can't show proof, whether it's receipts where the film was developed or whatever, as to when this was shot. Bill Munns said it to me on the show. It's right there for everybody to listen to. He said he held the film. They gave him the film. He looked at it with a loop after he saw it, and he himself said it is absolutely Kodachrome film, and it was absolutely manufactured in 1966. Of course, he argues there's no way to prove, because it was made in 1966, that anything was filmed on it. You can't prove when it was filmed, and that has been the narrative. Unfortunately, maybe it was even because of that interview that I did with him that I've even furthered that narrative in the community. But I'm here to say right now, if you stop and think critically, it does not matter when that was filmed. It makes no difference whatsoever. The only thing that matters is what's on the film. And you just described in great detail what you saw is what we know to be Patty in the 1967 Patterson Gimlin film. She's only supposed to exist on one piece of film. That was filmed on October 20th, 1967 by Roger Patterson with his K100 camera on that sandbar in Bluff Creek with Bob Gimlin at his side. Point blank, period, full stop. If what you say is true, and I believe it to be Patty, at a different time, whether it was a day before, 4 days after, 2 years after, matters not. If you saw Patty, as we know her, in another piece of film, on Kodachrome film, no matter when it was shot, that is 100% case closed, done deal, hoax, in my opinion. Do you agree with that?
100%. There is no way you're going to be able to get a Bigfoot again on camera as clear as they did the first time. Like I said, unless they ask for another take, everything is nullified once you see that suit. You can argue about when the film was shot. You can argue about leg movement. You can argue about pretty much anything. But once you see the suit, it's game over. There's no going around it. And it is the same suit. 100%. I can't wait for people to see this because I feel like I'm a crazy person. No one else has seen it. I just keep saying the same thing, but it's the same suit. And I can't wait for the people that have analyzed the PG film as much as they have. I'd like to see what they're going to say about this because it's like, are you going to do the same analyzation or whatever? Because it's the same suit, guys. Even Dr. Meldrum jumps up from his chair. Those are breasts. He's amazed that this same costume has breasts, and he sees it and he's a little teary-eyed. He's realizing what he's focused a lot of his time with is a hoax, but he's man enough to admit it. He basically says it's a dry run and that's about it. And it's shocking to see him say that. And they show the footage to Bob Gimlin also. They ask him, hey, Bob, who's on that horse? And he just kind of looks up and gives a little smile, and the interview's cut short. It's sad. They tried asking him again at the conference there, and he looked like he was ready to come clean. He was basically saying, yeah, I want to tell the truth. I'm ready to tell the truth. And unfortunately, his wife got up and blocked the shot and canceled their interview that they had scheduled. So it's really unfortunate, but it's the same suit, guys. Unfortunately, it's the same suit. And that's all I can really say until everybody sees it.
I've definitely reached out to several people that are close to Bob. I've been trying to get something out of him on the show, some sort of a statement. I know he's not doing tons of interviews. He's in his early 90s, but I do think the community wants to hear what he has to say about this. So hopefully that'll happen. I want to be respectful of your time, but one last question that I asked Bill that he couldn't answer for me that you certainly can. This is something that's come up about the secondary evidence, I'll call it, in this whole thing. You mentioned the late Dr. Jeff Meldrum. The first time I ever had Jeff on the show, he said to me, I remember it as clear as day, Brian, I am as certain as I could possibly be, other than standing on that sandbar right next to them today they filmed Patty. That's a real creature based on the trackway and the tracks alone. That was a question I asked Bill Munns because that has been such a huge part of this. It's not just the film. Again, I go back to it goes both ways, folks, the totality of the circumstances. If you have multiple pieces of evidence that you can put together, and I think that's what the big deal was for Jeff, was the trackway that he felt like was real. But here's the thing. If the film is a hoax, then all the secondary evidence that comes after that, like you said, the bulge that looks like a muscle on the leg, I don't give a shit at this point because it's a guy in a suit. So if it's a guy in a suit, then those tracks are now null and void. They're not even evidence at all. So do they address that at all that you recall in the documentary? Did they talk about the trackway and how that was made? Because Bill said it was a 4-hour interview almost 2 years ago. He couldn't recall specifically if they talked about that, and he hasn't seen the documentary. But I was curious if it was something that they even addressed or if it just didn't fit the narrative and it just wasn't there. Do you recall if they talked about the trackway at all?
Yeah, so when we got pulled into the Q&A for the documentary, there were a couple of people asking questions, and that was one of the questions that popped up. What about the trackway, the footprints? I believe Mark said that they had filmed some stuff about that, but it just didn't make it into the documentary. He was saying during that part that there was a lot of stuff that didn't make it into the documentary. I think there's also a part where Clint mentions about the suit being burned in a burn barrel. I asked him about that, and he said they shot that, but it didn't make it into the documentary. He said that they might be doing an extended version to have all of this extra stuff in there. So that would be really cool if that ends up happening, because there were some interesting being questions thrown at Clint and the producer and the director. They answered pretty much everything, saying we filmed a lot of stuff. Unfortunately, we had to condense this into an hour and 40 minutes. I'm sure they have enough stuff to make like a 3-hour documentary or like even a mini series. I'm sure that they've got so much footage. You're saying they interviewed Bill for 4 hours and he's featured in the documentary, but I don't think he's in there as much as some of the other people like Meldrum, Clint Patterson, obviously, Larry Lund, and those folks. They bring him in towards the end of the documentary to look at the footage because he is a film expert in that aspect. That's really the bulk of his information that he gives there. He does talk a little bit about his history and his involvement, but it's mainly towards the end of the documentary. And it's interesting that they got 4 hours of footage out of him, because I could definitely see an extended cut of this hitting the streaming platforms, which would be amazing if that happens. Yeah.
Like I said, I want to be respectful of your time. So I guess I'll give you the last word here. I don't know if you want to talk about it at all, but I know you've gotten some grief. I know people have attacked you personally. I know it's been a tough time, honestly. I don't know if you want to speak to that at all. I think to me, it's important that people hear that because you're just a dude going about life who went to see a documentary and you talked about what you saw, and people are coming out of the woodwork attacking you. I've gotten a little bit of just a tiny bit of that from certain people in the community because I've just stood up and said, look, I just want the truth. Oh, you're a traitor. You're not standing with Bob. You're against him. No, I'm not against anybody. I'm just for the truth. So how has that affected you? What's it been like just these last couple of weeks?
It's been pretty wild. I'm not going to lie. I've had a lot of threats and allegations thrown my way. People saying I was paid to be there. I actually paid to be there. I cost money out of my pocket to be there. It wasn't cheap. So throw that out of the window. Even now, the newest thing is they're actually doxing my place of work, which is pretty crappy. But luckily in my career, my boss is super cool, knows what I do as a hobby. I have a real job and stuff like that, but they're really cool about it. And it's unfortunate that it's getting to that. They're making memes of me and stuff like that, all types of just really childish stuff. And a lot of it is coming from these legacy Bigfoot personalities that are pumping this out, but saying, check this guy out. Something's fishy about his story. We need to know pretty much everything about him. And so it's been interesting. But on the other side, I've had a lot of support. A lot of people have come forward to support me, like yourself and some other people. And I'm really grateful for that. I had been emailing with someone from a entertainment magazine, and they popped into they're actually part of some groups in the Facebook and Reddit and stuff like that. and they're basically checking up on me saying, "Hey, are you okay? We're seeing all this stuff going on. We wanted to ask you some questions and stuff, but we see you're getting abused. We might hold off on doing this. If you're cool with that." I'm like, "Yeah, that's fine. Hopefully this all blows over once the documentary comes out, but we'll just have to wait and see." Again, it's shocking, but it's not unexpected. I'll say that.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part, man. I truly appreciate what you've
Yeah.
done, what you've put out there. You've put the video out initially, you've done follow-up videos, you're coming on here, you're talking to me about it. So I appreciate it very much, man. Everybody go over to Harry Man Road YouTube channel. I have it linked right here in the show notes. You guys show Eric some love. Go watch some videos, subscribe to his channel, put it out there, let your friends know about it. Eric, thank you so much for coming on, man. I've had a blast talking to you.
Hey, man, thank you. And anytime, I'm grateful for the opportunity to come on and just talk about what I've seen.